Hey everyone, this is a quick review on the Sunlu S8 3D printer. This is an FDM printer, so it's going to use 1.75 millimeter filament. Apologies for the state of my bar here. This is not my typical work area for my 3D printing. However, due to the size of this printer, I did need to kind of put it somewhere where I had a little bit more space, so everything kind of looks pretty bad at the moment. But anyway, this is the Sunlu S8 printer. This printer comes with a pretty large build space of about 310 millimeters by 310 millimeters, and then about 400 millimeters on the Z-axis. So you can get a pretty large printer, or pretty large print out of this. So for the sake of comparison, here is a 32-ounce bottle of isopropyl alcohol, and as you can see, there's still plenty of room above that for height. All right, so this is probably my fourth or fifth 3D printer at this point here. I left a couple things on the printer surface that I used this printer to make. So one of the things a couple things I wanted to point out here, some really good stuff that I liked about this printer. For one, this build volume for the printer is outstanding. You can print some very, very big things here. If you have any experience with something like Creality Ender 3 or Creality Ender 5, those are the only other two printers I've ever owned. This is substantially larger in terms of actual size and print volume. So that's one of the great features. Something that I wasn't a big fan of when I got this was that the company who sent this, Sunlu, they used those big office binder clips instead of clips like these guys right here. These ones here, these are sort of edgeless, I forget what they call them, I apologize, edgeless painting clips or something like that. But basically what I did was I switched over to these instead of those other clips, and it feels like, one, it grabs the whole build plate, the whole print plate to the heated bed much better, and it also doesn't intrude nearly as much onto the build surface itself or away from it. So I would recommend, if you do get this printer, to go ahead and get these switched over. Since we're looking at the build plate here, this comes with a heated bed, and it has a glass build surface attached to it. One of the things that they send along with this printer is this glue. So you can use the glue, however, you don't need it, and I recommend personally, from my own experience, not to use the glue. It makes a big mess, and I feel like, again, personal experience here, that the hassle is not worth what you get out of it. If your printer head, if the nozzle is close enough to the bed, if you have your bed appropriately leveled or trammed, however you want to call it, this will print just fine on here. Both of these prints were printed just right here the way they are. But if you want to use this nicely, one of the things I'll recommend is getting yourself some 91% isopropyl alcohol and clean down the glass bed surface before each print. So other than that, very happy with this build surface here. As you can see, this is the, I believe, i3 style of kinematics for the machine here. Essentially, the printer nozzle, the heated nozzle, traverses the x-axis back and forth, while the bed traverses the y-axis back and forth. I've noticed that this seems to be pretty stable, and compared to a Creality Ender 3, which again is one of my other printers that I'm experienced with, this one runs two 2020 rails down the middle, or down each side of it, rather than a single one that happens to go just through the middle. So in my experience, this seems to have provided a more stable print surface, or I'm sorry, a more stable printing experience as the bed traverses that y-axis back and forth here. Just kind of giving you a little bit of an overview of underneath. So getting the whole thing built and put together was very straightforward. This was probably one of the easiest printers that I've ever had in terms of the build goes. The whole thing was probably done in less than 30 minutes. Take that with a little bit of a grain of salt because I do have, again, some experience in building these. However, one of the nice things was this was largely already put together, except for, I believe, attaching this guy, this whole section right here, down to the bottom. And that was simply 2 bolts over here, 2 bolts over here. So while putting this together, one of the things that I noticed was that some of the pieces included in this printer, like this switch right here and this cover over here, are actually 3D printed. Whereas other companies, they send you like an injection molded one or whatever the case may be. This one came with a 3D printed one. There's a couple areas that use 3D printed pieces. One of the ones I was kind of surprised by, but happy to see, was this bed strain relief right here. This is 3D printed, but I was glad to see that it was on there. That makes it pretty nice, and it helps kind of keep some of the stress off of these cables pulling down from your build plate. All right, another really neat feature that this one comes pre-installed with right here is a filament runout sensor. I'm gonna kick this printer on so you can kind of see it. You'll see a green light that turns on when it notices that there it is right there, when there's filament in there. If filament is not in there, that green light will stop and the print will also stop. As you can see, there's also a light that is built into this print head right here. It's a neat idea. However, in practice, I wasn't super thrilled by it. You really don't get a whole lot of light out of it, and it's very concentrated to a particular spot. So as you can see on this model right here, I'm going to try to get this as best as I can. The light itself doesn't really provide much benefit. I think realistically, I don't know, if it would have been like a ring around the inside rather than like a singular LED up here, that would have been a bit better. However, it doesn't really affect the print itself, so no issues with that guy at all. All right, so our screen here. If you're, again, familiar with any of the Creality printers, or if you've used like Melzi boards with, I apologize, with Marlin running on it, you should be pretty familiar with this. It's the simple press of a button. Twist everything down to go through the different menus. And one of the things that I liked about this is if you go into prepare, there's two things out here that I really liked. So one was the bed leveling option. And what the bed leveling option is going to do, if you press that, it's going to take your printer head and it's going to take your printer head over here and it's going to run it to the 4 points, the 4 corners of this bed, and that's going to give you the opportunity to take a piece of paper, slide it underneath, and make the adjustments right here so you can get yourself where you need to be in terms of leveling or tramming your bed, however you want to call that. So that was a neat feature. All right, going back down to it here. Another cool feature that I saw on this that my other printers did not have is if you come down to the preheat PLA or ABS, essentially what you can do here is you can set these to preheat. So Creality printers and a bunch of them already have that. However, the one thing I didn't see on the other ones that I saw on this was that I had the option right here from this menu without having to connect via a terminal of any kind, so I can set what those parameters are, what I would like them to be for the preheat for both the bed and for the nozzle itself. So I thought what came with was a little low. It preheated the bed to 40. I preheat it to about 60 if I'm using PLA. So I've printed with both PLA and with ABS on this printer so far. Both of these are PLA. I actually gave away the print that I made out of the ABS, so I apologize, I don't have that there. But basically the typical things kind of apply with ABS. You're going to use higher temperatures, and you want to make sure you don't have ambient airflow around it, because that's going to make everything peel up and your print's not going to stick. But the PLA, really great, no problems there. Very happy overall with this print. I did very minimal adjustments on this printer when I got it, just kind of went through the bed leveling, and as you can see, it's really not bad at all. I was actually really impressed with the quality of this print straight away, without needing to use any kind of BL Touch or any automatic bed leveling sensor. So I thought that was a really nice feature. I thought that was really nice about this printer. Everything came out pretty good overall right from the start. Very minimal work needed on my end. Another nice thing about this guy is this one uses a dual Z stepper motor system. Get you a good angle there. You can see that other guy. So essentially it's going to use 2 Z rods to lift the printer head, this whole arm up, this whole arm here up, rather than one on just the side. So your movement's going to be a lot more stable and even as it goes up and down. Overall, I've been very, very pleased with this printer. The build volume alone is tremendously worthwhile. So, you know, no complaints overall for this printer. Very happy. And so I forgot to mention, for this extruder up here, it does come with like the plastic kind of basic extruder, but compared to my experience with the ones that come with stock on the Creality board, overall I thought this one did a better job of gripping the filament right from the get-go. I don't really feel the need to get this switched over to a dual gear setup or anything like that. You know, obviously I might hot rod it in the future, but as it stands now, it's pretty good the way it is. Something else that I wanted to highlight that came with this that a lot of other printers don't come with is this handy dandy acrylic spool holder here. This was pretty easy to set up. The worst thing about it was the brown paper. Are you kidding me? The worst thing about it was this brown paper. The worst thing about it was the brown paper that gets attached on here, and you know, I just had to peel that off, and that was kind of a pain. Other than that, what came with this printer was the glue I mentioned earlier, the scraper, the wrench here, a few different Allen keys to help you adjust the different spots on the printer itself, and you get these filament snips back there, and then underneath the filament snips there is a nozzle cleaner. Again, overall, this thing's very good. I was very, very pleased with how it printed right from the start. It's a little bit noisy is the only complaint that I would really make, but that's kind of expected anymore with 3D printers here. So, you know, not really surprised about that. You could obviously switch out the main board if you wanted to, and get different stepper drivers with a different main board and get that changed over, but you know, totally up to you. All in all, very, very happy with this machine, and I'm excited to get into further prints with it. Thank you guys very much for watching, and hopefully this helps somebody out. Have a good night.